flight mode.
What's up, everybody? It is me, Travis, here with Sjokz. How's it going, Sjokz?
I'm good. How are you, Travis? It's really warm here. We have no AC because Europe.
Yeah, what is up? Europe does not. But oh, by the way, shout out to Alienware. Europe is crazy. They don't like nobody over there uses air conditioning.
Well, it is coming. There's like more, but obviously it wasn't that warm here 20 years ago, and now it's just really warm.
I guess that's
So,
true.
so
Um,
yeah.
but I don't know. I've grown up with air conditioning, so anytime I go over there, it's just wild to me because everybody just tweets about how hot it is, and I'm like, just turn on the AC.
So I have a fan actually blowing. It's under my desk, which everyone laughs at, but that's the best place to get airflow. Okay.
I'm not gonna go into that anyway. So one of the interesting things is the last time we talked. Oh, so for the context on this conversation, we're going to be discussing the sort of the ways in which LEC does their broadcast because you and I were chatting about this the other day, and then it became like, hey, why don't we just record something about it? So here we
Yeah.
are. But before we dive into that, I just want to do a check-in on you and see how you're doing because you and I did a conversation maybe like 5 or 6 weeks ago about life in quarantine. But I
Yeah.
actually I don't know what things are like in Berlin now.
Much better. So Germany had, well, like really good responses with the crisis. There was just like an outbreak yesterday in a factory, which is not ideal. But overall, the numbers were going down there. I don't think there's been a new case in Berlin for a while now. So we have gone more back to normal than you guys have. You have to wear a mask to the supermarket. You are advised to wear a mask actually as much as possible, although not everyone does it. We are back at the studio, like half of us, not everyone, just like the minimum amount of people that really have to be there that it benefits the show. And that's been great because I was really done from doing things from home, be
Yeah.
honest. So
No, I
yeah.
mean I think there's a lot of frustration on the league side. I think with just how poorly a lot of this stuff has been handled in America. And I know
Uh,
that I'll lose subscribers to my YouTube channel for saying that. It's like somehow a controversial thing to say we're not
well,
doing a very
we
good job of it.
Well, we had a bunch of issues as well, right? And I think a part of what makes it complicated, and this goes for all the leagues that went online, is that you want to emulate the level of production you had in the studio online, but you
Yeah.
run into so many blockers that you wouldn't. The fact that you don't have a direct line of communication, that there's a delay, that there's internet issues, all that stuff makes it much harder, obviously.
I really appreciate that you have a pen in your hand ready to go for this conversation.
Well, look, okay, I made notes. I made so many notes.
Yeah, and this is what's I think this is adorable. You because I thought this was just going to be a casual chat about how this stuff goes, and you're like, I am ready to explain how it all happens.
Well, let me explain why. Because, like, first of all, many of the people that work on LCS are my colleagues. Like, even though I'm a freelancer, we worked together directly when I was over there or for Worlds and all that. And the thing is, I recognize the situation that they are in at this point in time because from 2015 until 2018, the EU LCS was kind of in the same situation in the fact that then everything about the broadcast got criticized nonstop, from no personalities to bad casters to bad hosts to bad sets to bad videos to pauses to everything. And it's at a point where you feel like nothing you do is right. And I don't doubt that there are many people that want to do the best job they can, but they're also not helped by the situation right now. And it really sucks when everyone just keeps pounding down on you. So what I want to do here is just outline how we got out of that basically, and what the situation is like now and how everything works to inform. And it's never for me and us versus them. It's really just we all benefit if everything's great, right? And I think
Yeah,
we've
but
picked up
it's
a couple of
probably
things
nice.
along the
I
way.
mean, all you guys are competitive people. It's nice whenever you feel like, yeah, we put on the better show this week or
I
whatever.
mean, listen, after 3 years of like getting flamed and hate threads every single week about our broadcast, it feels good that it's now going well. But like, it doesn't make you feel better if your colleagues who you love and work with are getting the same shit now. For a lot of things they can't help, but probably a lot of things that will change. But like, I mean, I think you know more about them than I do at this point in time about the production. So
Yeah. Well, I'm super happy we can chat about this. I do remember. Oh man, it used to be so much fun whenever, at least you guys had the better players, and then we had the better broadcasts, and so it was
everything
like,
else. No, and then
yeah,
you took our players. So like then you got all the
we
great
take them
players.
after you're done with them. You know what I mean? Like it's never. We're not. Perks is not joining LCS next year and all that stuff. It's we. You guys, you send over what's done with. Anyway.
So yeah. Say one thing I do want to say before we start is that like because I think people would bring this up and of course I think a lot of issues occur when you go online, which we had the same problems. And there's some things like, you know how it is, you run all these shows from home, Travis. Sometimes there's a technical issue and you can, for the life of you, with 7 specialists, not find out what setting it is or what's wrong. And that's super frustrating. But I do think that when we look holistically at what these broadcasts are, and they are entertainment products, and much like a TV show or a sports broadcast can't be the same thing for 10 years, a decade in a row, our broadcasts can't be. And they especially can't be because we are in the esports space and in the gaming space, which is a tech space where everything evolves much quicker when it comes to the digital field. So, and I didn't see this until we kind of did it with the whole revamp, because I thought we can do this forever the way we do it and like people are going to watch. But the thing is they don't, because there's more and more broadcasts and there's more and more people evolving. And yeah, I didn't know how to get out of the situation with the team a couple of years ago, but I'm very happy that it worked. And I just learned that you can never stand still and you have to keep evolving.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I recently did a Twitter poll, a very unscientific Twitter poll, about if people's interest has increased or decreased. The majority of people have decreased interest in the LCS, and a lot of the people that replied were saying, hey, I watch the LPL English broadcast now instead, or I watch more LEC or whatever. And I understand that it's not really a competition, but it is a situation where some people might decide like, hey, if there's a really great English broadcast for the LPL, who's been super dominant, maybe I will decide to invest my time into that or something. So totally hear you on that. But let's actually get into stuff. So maybe you can tell me what changed over time to really bring the LEC to sort of the point that it is now, especially compared to the EU LCS. I don't know if this was, I'm sure it's a ton of different things, but maybe you can help give a couple of the big highlights.
I'll try and give some of the big highlights to start. I think many people saw the 2019 rebrand as a big part, which it was, but I want to draw the attention to the fact that we started doing that in 2018, and you may remember that is then that we got kind of the new studio with the big backdrop. We lost the desk, we stood up for the segments. Now, what happened in the year leading up to 2018 was already a lot of strategy sessions with a lot of different people within the broadcast, and really hard ones at that. It's not easy to find like a good workflow when you're trying to produce a live show that goes live 2 times a week. Like no other type of broadcast in the world almost does that, right? So we had a lot of strategy sessions where we were like, okay, hey, listen, the people don't like our personalities. The people say we don't have player stories, blah, blah, blah. We know we do. So what are the ways in which we can highlight that more with the resources we have? And, how can we make everything more kind of what the people want? And that seems to be player stories, interviews, formats that can facilitate that, meaning longer interviews, meaning content pieces, meaning specific strategies for players. That not everyone is an interview genius and is like a jokesman or someone who's great on screen. Sometimes, Nemesis is a good example, they're just good players. So how can we highlight these players without necessarily having their image? How do we highlight them with stats, with content pieces, blah, 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 all that stuff. And narrative was, of course, a big point. And I think we over-indexed a bit on that. But that was a big point. Like, hey, if we're not going to tell these stories about the players and the teams in an adequate way, we are doing them a disservice. And
can I pause really quickly?
Yeah.
And just ask you, because what you're saying there is particularly interesting to me, because we, right now, it is my opinion, and I think I've heard from others as well, that the LCS right now has a bit of a drought of like very outgoing personalities and people that folks are really interested in. And even some of our players that used to be really popular, like Aframu, really outgoing. It seems like he's less interested in doing like interviews now and that type of content. And so it also feels like we have a bit of a personality drain going. I'm curious, like, do you think there's really big opportunities to overcome those challenges?
I think that's very interesting because I do get the impression that many players who give interviews when it's in the LCS, they are a bit more media. Like it seems that they're very media trained in that they don't want to color outside of the box too much and they want to be quite careful, which in essence is also understandable. But I don't necessarily think that it's not in them. And we also had a lot of players we had to build up in EU that weren't interesting to the big public, right? But I think when you create the avenues of content where they can shine and they see that it's received well, they will be more willing to do the other things with you and the other projects. Necessarily, like something you bring up is like, oh, if you don't get a lot out of them, well, the interviews are always very short. So we consciously said, well, the interview is not just something that we have in between breaks. We want to make it as diverse and long as possible and put the interviewer in the position where they can get more out of the players. And yes, then you sacrifice a bit of the analysts talking at points, which is also an act of balance, right? But it's a constant push and pull. But yeah, I do think we've been blessed with also just some very outgoing and players and also organizations who've made a lot of cool content, and that helps as well. So yeah.
Okay, so then going back to what you were saying, so you guys sat down, you were looking, and you were discussing the ways in which you guys looked at players and how do you handle all that stuff. But there were other things that you guys wanted to accomplish as well.
Yeah, well, so basically we ended up with a couple of statements and stuff like that about and we wanted to be the premier esports entertainment broadcast or something along those lines in the world. And we were all like, well, we're never going to be that because people hate us and blah, 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 blah. And it took literally months and months of meetings. Now, the thing that put it all that was a catalyst for everything was the LEC rebrand. And you have to know, behind just a rebrand, there is so much that went on behind the scenes in terms of people that left the broadcast team, that joined, new people that didn't fit within the team, within the content team that got overhauled like 2-3 times, people within the casting team, all that. Kind of it all went through so many changes in order to get to what we have now. And then the rebrand came. And I think many people think that design studios, so they are the ones that did the package, let's say, that they kind of just showed up and did it. In fact, what it was months and months and months of workshops with everyone in the office, not just casters or people from production, but social media, audio, everyone who had watched or a part of the show, fans, and kind of throwing things at the wall and mood boards and asking us, and I remember specifically asking us, what do you want this show to represent? And some of the key things that were there were entertainment, best League of Legends in the world. And obviously this is all like you have to overshoot, right? Because we're not world champions, I know. Like great League of Legends to watch, European sports style tradition, not taking yourself too seriously, but delivering diversified content, analysis, a high level knowledge about the game, player stories, rivalries, dynasties. You can see of some of why the over indexing happens.
Yeah.
But like all of that from all different people. And like, that's just me, but like someone else from the graphics department could have and probably said, hey, a bright look, a fresh look. It could go as far as the outfits that are worn on broadcast. Like all of this was just put into this pot with these long calls and these long talks with the people of Design Studio, who then brought us a package of graphics and tone and catchphrases and all that, which we then had to keep working with.
So part of my curiosity as well is, was there like a single person who came in and really drove a lot of this, or was it a collect? I mean, obviously the team as a whole worked on it, but there's been calls, for instance, to have the LCS get like a creative director, or the situations where I don't know, the idea is like, oh, maybe there's a new, I met the new country manager at Worlds last year and had a conversation with him, and obviously Alban shows up around this time. So
yes.
Is there a visionary that really pushes a lot of this stuff forward? Or, I mean, how does this stuff get evolved? Because it obviously has to happen at a high level.
Now, this is just from my perspective. I think from my perspective, what was needed is that the team now exists out of entirely people who are driven and show up every day and want to make it the best thing possible. And that wasn't always the case before. And in fact, many of the people that work on the teams today are the people who had those ideas in 2016, but for many reasons, workload, resources, vision, could not realize them. I think specifically, John Needham being more involved with us and taking over in EU a couple of years ago was great. Some of the existing managers, were willing to completely throw everything overboard and start from zero and do what was needed. And I'm citing specifically Dirk and some of our managers who have been there for many, many, many years, who could very well be stuck in their ways, but they saw that it needed a drastic change and they did it. Alban is an absolute godsend. Alban Deschalot, who is in charge of business development over in EU, the way in which he just got brand sponsorships and sponsors connected to the LEC that work in symbiosis with what we're trying to do and don't just get slapped on a graphic, but create things like the Kia advertisements, which, these are just fun to watch and stuff like that, is all those factors together, and mainly the feeling that everyone who's there now and who was there for the rebrand really wanted it to succeed and was willing to do everything 100% and having buy-in from everyone. I think that was the biggest thing, willingness to change.
This is a weird question, but I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase it. Were there people who were less interested in change or were kind of, maybe they started off in the very beginning, they were really committed, over time it became like more of a job for them, that are no longer working on the LEC?
Yes, for sure. And it's not ever that black and white, like, oh my God, this person got fired. It's just like got recognized that it wasn't the best fit. And as I say, specifically in the content team, I phoned it in for a while. Like, I was at the brink of being done because I had the feeling, and we don't need to go into this again, but for a long time it was like LCS and EU LCS sister broadcasts, but there were not enough people to do everything we wanted to do. It was just frustrated because whatever we pitched just didn't end up getting realized, and it was just really annoying. And I was like kind of mad about that whole situation too. But I also didn't see like that. Sometimes you don't see what's right in front of you, like that you need to change your ways, and but you also need an influx. And the rebrand really, really helped. And to your question specifically, yeah, it does feel like if without the direction of those people and the willingness to change, nothing would have happened, right? And yeah, I guess that's what's needed when you want to do an overhaul like this.
Well, and I think that's interesting because that you mentioned that, because I mean, I have worked in groups before where people who would normally be very passionate might think like, oh, I can't accomplish the things that I want to here because the system doesn't allow me to. And in those moments, a lot of those times you'll see those people just stop trying to push for like the creative things that they want because they feel like there's like an exhaustion thing. And, I don't want to speculate as to whether or not that's happening on the LCS, but it does feel as though that type of thing can occur naturally when systems become very rigid, and whenever a product has existed for a really long time and people say, no, this is the way we do things. And so I think it's interesting to hear that you were in a situation where you're even saying you were kind of burned out or you were kind of phoning it in, but sort of this group collective decision to revitalize the product helped bring you back in a really committed way.
Yeah, and it wasn't like overnight, because these strategy sessions were brought in and it's all kind of corporate, and there's a lot of talking about feedback and buy-in and stuff like that. And you know how it goes, right? So a lot of us were definitely like, what is this going to bring? And then you get into it and you really get into the nitty gritty, and you realize that these people just want the best as well. And you realize that you're being heard, and that's so important. The best example of this is Daniel Drakos, who was there with us a couple of years ago, and he had all the ideas he has now. But after a while, I guess he was also like, well, why would we try and pitch more if it doesn't get realized anyway? And that's why, I mean, like if I look at the broadcast, like Mark was producing for offline TV and did all these hilarious skits. Kobe is one of the funniest people I know. Dash is a trained actor that can do literally anything. So I would love to see them in all kinds of diverse things, and it doesn't have to be all skits, right? But I think there's just so much that they could do.
No, I really like what you pointed out, especially with Dash, because I was thinking about this the other day, where I was talking to somebody who does stuff with the broadcast, and it's like, okay, well, I don't think that the answer for LCS is to just be like, and here's our band, the LCS Tronic thing, but that was a situation where you guys were able to lean into, I don't know, presumably Vedius and Dracos and those guys like music and have some sort of talent in that facility. I don't know enough about their expertise in that, but
no, well, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and explain.
No, so one of the, how do you say that, adagios or the adages when we went into this whole thing was, and I wrote it down, producers telling us, don't ever do anything less than 100% on our broadcast, because you have buy-in for us to make everything as grand as you want it to be. Because that rap, that does not work because Dracos is actually a pretty good writer, because he had help with writing. They had a professional studio helping for the beat. I had to rap on beat, which was fucking impossible. They had a external company, Young Elder, who still works with us, who's done video clips for big rappers and stuff like that, to work with us to do that. They had a stylist on site. They don't do anything half-assed. And of course, that wouldn't have been possible without the resources we've gotten with the influx of LEC. But I think that's a big key to a lot of the content. And we noticed it as well, because sometimes for the Saturday show, which we build overnight, we're like, oh, we want to do this skit, and then we do it, and it's kind of just like, the type. It happens on LCS. It happens on LEC. It's like we had a funny idea or a good idea, but we kind of didn't prepare it as much as we should have, so it kind of fell flat,
Well, and so that's all very good points. And I think, what for me is, I was talking to my friend about the music thing is like, okay, clearly there's a lot of passion to do like a band situation there. I don't think we necessarily need to do that here, but Dash is an actor. And so like I've seen Dash do some skit stuff. I don't know if he's comfortable, but like you think you could lean into that, right? Like have Dash do these dramatic reenactments of
well, he does it sometimes, doesn't he?
Sometimes, but like you could imagine sort of like the Kia ad, right? Where like there's not too much acting in that. It's a lot of shots of people doing stuff, but it's telling the story of the group all coming together. I'm thinking of the like Ocean's 11 style one, and you could imagine, like, again, in a world where not everyone was stuck at home, Dash like doing some sort of leading the charge of getting ready for summer, or I don't know, going to all the different teams and doing something. There's all sorts of different stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did a spoof or we didn't do a spoof. They released the new LEC, the electronic song, and they had us all film stuff from home. And again, it looks worse than an actual video clip, but we got like a 30-page spreadsheet from the lady being like, set up your home camera like this, point it like this is the light you need, this is the outfit you need, this is the shot you need, and then you can do what you want, but like all this. And that's just the point, that everything is very, very deliberate over here, to the point where sometimes I'm like, do we really need another Slack message and a WhatsApp message about, this or that? But it does help. And this kind of systematic, we're all doing this every week, is definitely helping. And it was so much harder at home, right? So it definitely is also for
the lack of green screen opportunity, I feel like, is crazy to me, because it's so funny, because I just feel like there's so much opportunity to ask the talent to like, hey, here's a green screen, prop it up, film something in front of it. And I think this community, as much as the community was like frustrated with some of the technical issues, I think right now they would accept scuffed looking things from the team. And so if you had a bunch of people doing a bunch of stupid stuff in front of green screens, and I don't know, I'd like to see that. So to your point about filming stuff at home, like it does feel like there's a lot of opportunity here that isn't necessarily being realized.
Yeah, it could be. But then again, I don't know what the situation is, how many
Yeah.
people are doing what, and there is a lot of like technical baggage. What I did want to also say about content is that the cool thing I think about content when it like everything here, every idea has merit, and we've been told that now since 3 years. Like every idea you have merit. Put it in Slack, tell it to a producer, and we'll see. And they don't all pan out because we're absolutely crazy. But when you look at the Wednesdays when we have our pitch meeting, it's like our first meeting on the day on Wednesday. We have a program called Favreau in which you can put everything, and
Yeah.
there's a list of 30 pitches from everyone on the team, from producers to the talent to even like the social media, or like, everything has merit. And unfortunately, the producers have to sift through a lot of it. And then we're also, but why doesn't Ender get to do his funny skit? Well, because we can't plan it in this week, but we'll do it next week, you know?
Right.
But it's cool, that idea that everyone can just like input something, because, yeah, it feels like it's just really cool. It's just a really good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds. I mean, again, I talked about this in my video, but hearing you reiterate it, it does sound as though they really enable the creativity of the talent, like you and Dracos and all these other people, to accomplish what you want to do. And I mean, neither of us, I think, has much insight into whether or not, what those conversations are like behind the scenes, whether or not there's a drought of stuff being pitched from talent, or if it's being pitched and they don't know. But it's really cool to see the results of that on the LEC. I'm trying to think of. Oh, maybe you can provide some light into Quickshot's role, because I have a theory, which is that because Quickshot comes from a talent side, he is perhaps pretty good at like finding the Dracos and the Vediuses and like working with them and developing them over time. I don't know if maybe he doesn't have that role and I've just completely misread the situation, but I'm kind of curious how all that works.
So basically, and I know Trevor won't mind me saying that, but there's this thing that goes around that Trevor is the creative director of the
Yeah,
pitches.
I know
We do,
that's not true.
we don't have a creative director, which doesn't mean that he isn't creative,
Right.
right? But we don't have that position. What he is outside of being a caster is someone who cares about the talent development of the casters a lot. Now, that's of course a bit difficult because he is a caster himself, so this isn't like solely him. There's also Dirk next to him and other people who help. But in general, we take talent development very, very seriously. And I think the key is that nobody is put like in a box of we want you to be this or this or this. It's more, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And what do you think you can do? And do you want to try something wacky or this or that? And Trevor is very good at talking to people about those things, and especially as a co-caster at enabling especially the new colors that have come up, because
Yeah.
he's had Ender come up, he's had Froskuren come up, and someone made a funny tweet that was like, oh, whenever Trevor casts with someone, they get like a praise thread or whatever. It's because Trevor often like deprioritizes his own cast so he can set up his co-caster for success, and that's also kind of emulated by what he does behind the scenes for all of us. And like talent development is super, super important because not everyone is going to be the same broadcaster, and that's also the beauty of everything. I'm personally very involved in Laura's development, for instance, because my role leans closely to what she does in France and what she does on our broadcast and stuff like that. And it's always about feedback and talking a lot about people getting feedback and how to get feedback, and do you want it during the show, do you want it harsh, do you want it, all that stuff, and working with people to find out what their strengths are and what they want to do. And yes, then you get Vedi on a horse and like the fucking Vedius expanded universe or whatever, but it's fine.
I I think so. I will take from that a couple different things. One is I think the community is pretty good at identifying the places where something they're like, this is bad or this is cringe or I don't like the overlay or whatever. I think, and one thing I didn't really touch on or tried to touch on a little bit in my video is talent development is really important. And I think we've got some really talented people over in North America, but in some cases, like I do not see them growing, which is I think, an issue with the broadcast, where I would like to see, different personalities go in different directions or try things that they haven't before, or like become much better. It doesn't say that like as casters they don't get better at casting, you know what I mean? But it's like I look at the path that a lot of your talent went on, and I wish that I could see something similar in North America. And the other thing is, I think just finding that talent has been really, it's been really impressive to me what they've been able to do in LEC. And like, great example is Jat just left.
Yeah.
Do I have any expectations that within the next 6 months we're going to see this amazing new, where did you find this person, pop into the broadcast? Yeah, I mean, but it does feel like in LEC it would be very quick, like it, at least from the outside, it feels like there would be a bigger effort to try to find somebody, start developing them, do a good job there.
Well, I think a part of that has to do with the fact that we have been hit with kind of the leaving of Mitch, of Crepo, and of the Fisio, which were two of like such big powerhouses that were also like the epitome of analysis, right? Worldwide almost. So we've had to anticipate that for many times, because the Fisio like always had the air that he didn't want to cast forever and this and that.
I mean, we've never seen Jat leave the cast before, so and
he's come back. So, but yeah, a lot of that has to do with the people behind the scenes, and a big role for Quickshot, who's constantly driving for that talent and also seeing diamonds in the rough. And like, Ender still doesn't have tons of fans, but he's getting more and more, because behind the scenes it's like, hey, did this work? Did it not work? What do you want to put the emphasis on this next cast? And there's also like, there's specific social media strategies that we think about, like my crusade is to kind of show that we have a lot of analysis on our broadcast, because I kind of hate this kind of moniker of, I always see it like LCS has the analysis and LEC does it. It's like, have you listened to our broadcast? It's just that the things that get the most attention are the skits, the things that pop off on social.
Yeah.
But and yes, in the first like year and a half after 2018, we over-indexed on narrative. But since then, since we've been in a good place, it's been completely different. We even have we have themes we hit for every show, like for a ready check, which is half hour. We want storylines, narrative, and player-based focus. We want comedic segments. We want analysis, and we want educational content. Those are like 4 pillars of things we want to hit. And furthermore, we want this many educational segments over the weekend, this many focused analysis segment next to the analysis in game. There's something called Project In-Game, which the stats team and the colorcasters are working on, the play-by-plays, which looks to elevate the in-game performance in terms of how things can get shown. We had the funny skill order of Kaisa last week, which was like wrong, but it's not perfect, but see where we're trying to go to like innovate the way in-game analysis gets delivered and stuff like that. It's my personal crusade to show that we do a lot of that. It's just, you do have to listen and not only watch the skits.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I only watch the skits, so I'm unaware entirely.
But it's a balance. It's a balance. And that's why I also think it's such a hard one also for LCS, because like when people say it's always dry or whatever, and then I remember genius skits and genius moments on the desk and super compelling discussions, or like the doctor skit, or when they had the PC and where they were explaining champions at the PC nook that they had at the analyst desk, or Dash doing his dramatic reader, all that. I'm like, all that's there, but it almost seems like it needs to be deliberate. You know what I mean? And there needs to be like a big plan of, this is the direction we want to go with these accents, which is what the LEC did basically, right? So that's, again, no idea how things go over there.
Guess who just got home?
Kobe.
Sam, you want to come say hi? You want to come say hi to a friend? Do you have something in your mouth? Oh, you have a mask on. That makes sense. Maybe he'll walk in a second.
Yeah,
there
of course
he
has a Trevor.
Hey!
Hi, Kobe. Is that a cat?
Doing a show?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about LEC and LCS.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
He brought me a sandwich. Midnight Snack MS. Yes. There's a place called Carving Board that's super good. All
I
right.
have to go record stuff. Bye.
Hi, Kobe.
You can close my door if you want.
Okay.
This is all staying
See?
in the video, by the
Tell
way.
me this guy isn't funny. Tell me this guy can't carry a comedic segment. It's one of the
He's-
funniest people I know.
He's the worst part of the broadcast. Him
He's
and Mark.
the funniest person I know.
Thanks.
Um,
Well, it's the second funniest person you know, right?
yeah, I'm the funniest person.
What,
That's true.
all right.
Hey,
We're wrapping up, but is there other stuff that you think I haven't hit on or that we should talk about?
there's two things that are pet peeves of mine that I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
One is I think that people need to realize that showmanship and being a complete caster or on-air personality is the most important thing over being only the best analyst. And I will say, like, you always have to think about the audience that watches you in terms of what do you think? Is there 15% to 20% of people that are the super hardcore people that send you the tweets, that post on Reddit, that send you to Instagram DMs, that watch every broadcast from start
I mean,
to
I
finish?
would
Is that
bet it.
like
Yeah,
50?
I'd bet it's even less than that. It's probably like 10 or 15%. There's a ton of people that are just like, I play League of Legends. Oh, look, this show's on. I'll turn it in.
Yeah, and then there's like, and we get the soundboard mostly of the intense people who see everything, right? And obviously they're gonna, like, if we say Reckless 5 times a broadcast and you've watched the whole one, well, then you're gonna think we're mentioning him too much. But to, I think, 60% of people who like to watch it as an entertainment product, you have to strike a balance on all accords. And that's the hard one, because you have to like create a broadcast that is appealing to that 15%, to that 60%, and then to the super casual who like just tune in and like put it on, or are just a TSM fan or whatever, right?
Yeah.
All of those things. And that makes it hard for us to get feedback from the community often, because we can't just only cater to the super hardcore people all the time, because yeah, it's hard. It's just hard. But I do think that showmanship is also very important. And I think people need to realize that, yeah, it's important to show these different sides of yourself. And Verius is a good example. Monte Cristo is a great example. He is considered a fantastic caster because he's great at telling the stories too, and about weaving everything together. And he's willing to put on a show as well, right? Next to being someone who knows the game very deeply. And like, yeah, I think that's something that needs to be explored, because that's quite interesting, which I'm not saying there shouldn't be analysis. Like, that's the opposite of what I'm saying. It just should all be in a way that's, I don't know,
Fluid,
nice,
dynamic.
fluid, dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really good way of putting it. What really echoes with me or resonates with me is just, I would love it if the passionate fan broaden their perspective, like you said, to understand that not everyone feels the same way as they do about what they're seeing. You know, there were some people in the thread that I did about the broadcast where they're like, honestly, nobody watches this show for the people that are on it. They just watch for the games. Like, I don't even pay attention to what's happening on the analyst desk. And I'm like, okay, the experience that you have is not necessarily representative.
Also, you're lying.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a lot of the stuff that is, you can see the stuff get clipped out and put on Reddit. People very clearly like this stuff. You guys have huge social followings. If people only really cared about the game, you know, and that's a very extreme example, but it is true that I think a lot of people who are like, there's just not enough analysis for me. Okay, maybe, but then you can go watch like LS co-stream it and maybe get more of it if you'd like, you know, like or you can watch more analysis videos. You know, it's not always about the exact formula that each individual person wants, and what you were saying, you know, I think really hones in on that.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think like we're constantly evolving, right? And as I said, we went too ham on the narrative. So now we're trying to be more deliberate in where we are, and are trying to insert more educational / analysis, purely very focused content for those hardcore viewers as well as the same content for viewers that are less hardcore. So I think the key is also to keep evolving and seeing how the space happens. The last thing I just wanted to mention is I think people conflate the terms professionalism and style very often. Yeah. Because very often I see, and we've talked about this at length, the way I'm perceived compared to Dash, for instance, but I also see it for Like the LCS is professional and the LEC is cringy or memey, but they mean that in a good way, right? And I think professionalism, being professional, means that you show up prepared, you are passionate in your job, you're trying to deliver the best product possible, and all those things. And everyone working on both of these broadcasts are that. Like, hopefully, right? There's no one who just like phones it in, and like hopefully. And it's not because Verius does a skit that he's not professional, or like the broadcast is not professional. If anything, it's a style difference.
Yeah.
Right. And it just hurts me when I see like, oh, they're not professional, because that would mean that we show up and don't care, which it's the opposite.
No, the word professional is one of those words that I think the community likes to use as a bludgeon, because it's not like the word and the term is broad enough that it can be used in a lot of different ways, but people will use it one way to mean the other way. Yeah. And so they'll say like, this person isn't professional, and that sounds really damning, when in reality, like, they're just referencing like, oh, I want them to be more buttoned up and be more serious. Like, get Verius out of his sumo suit and put him in a button-up tie or something. It's just like, that's a style difference, to your point. There's a lot of words like that.
Yeah, but this gets thrown around a lot for me and Dash specifically, and it really hurts me because, like, we are fundamentally different hosts in style. But I just really dislike when people say, oh, Sjokz is not as professional. It's like, do you know what that word means? That is so hurtful, because if anything, and I talked to James about this at length, because, like, I think, oh, all I see is those comments, when he says, well, all I see is that I'm too buttoned up comments. So it's like, it's always something, right?
It's very unprofessional of me to be eating chips right now. So I that is a situation that is unprofessional, I would agree.
Exactly. And like when there's a lot of pauses or there's errors on our graphics, that you could say that's unprofessional. If I like, and I think a lot from me comes because of like the way I approach my interviews, and I have evolved in that, I think, in the years. But like I make an art, or I try to make an art of the fact that I know exactly what's happening in this segment. I know which graphic is coming when. I know which lower third is coming when. I know which replay is coming when, because I've had a hand in it with production. But I don't want you to know that. Yeah. And if a topic comes up that is more interesting to me than the full screen of Reckless we're about to see, I push my button and I say, producers, drop graphic, continuing with discussion. But you don't see that. What you see is Sjokz going, whoa, 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 we're supposed to have a graphic, but actually I'd like you to talk about this. And people say, oh, she's too loose and too loosey-goosey and whatever. But, like, oh, it grinds my gears, because, like, I'm trying to hide the fact that things are systematic and scripted. You know what I mean? And I think that's also professionalism.
And you won't say this, but I will, which is at least some portion of that criticism is just people perceiving it's like the gender difference thing, right? Like Tigris has been called out frequently as being inauthentic recently, and people are like, oh, it just feels like she doesn't fit within the broadcast, and or like she doesn't care. And it's like, Tigris seems pretty nerdy to me. You know, it's weird shit like that.
It's like her first broadcast.
Yeah, there was a bunch of conversation about that in one of the Reddit threads recently, and I was actually really surprised at how it felt like people were realizing or honing in on the idea that, like, if Tigris was just like a nerdy looking dude, people would be like, wow, she fits in this broadcast so much better. Yeah, it's just like, it's really weird how that stuff works.
It might very well be. I try, because like I've perceived a lot of misogynism, obviously, in every part of my professional life. So I try for myself to keep my sanity, to not think of it from that angle. I do call it out when I see it, obviously, but like for my sanity, I try to look at really, and it's that professionalism. I just wish people would stop using that word, because if they say, I like this person's style over this person's because of this and this, that makes the other person also feel much better. And that's something to work with. Yeah. But if you just hear, you're not professional, it's like, holy shit, I might just quit my job right here.
This is now your trigger word, much like mine was cringe. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, great, you think this is cringe, or people will just say cringe, bro, cringe, and it's just like, there was no discussion when you say that word. It's just like,
it's cringe.
It's just so stupid.
Yeah, by the way, we recorded something today that you're gonna find extremely cringe.
Oh, great. Can't wait. Is it about me?
No, dude, it's not about you.
Okay,
It
well,
has to do with our song
after
of the
Ender
week.
emulate, you said that I will find very cringe. I don't know, but Ender did that whole parody of me, which I thought was very cute, and
Yes.
so I didn't know. I don't know if you guys were progressing that character further. I think that
It's
should
like
be.
unprogressible. Like you're pretty one-dimensional, so I think it's
And
just.
on that note, anything you want to say, because we're wrapping up this interview.
I hope this was interesting to people. Again, like I don't want to shit on my colleagues and stuff like that because I know what it is to be in this position. I also hope that situation gets better over there in terms of lockdown and everything, and that everything can go back to normal, and then you'll see a huge difference. Thank you, Travis, for this interview. I hope it was informative enough, and I hope I didn't get triggered too much. And that's that.
I mean,
and
I
Cat
think-
for Kobe.
Yeah. Okay. I think that just to put an end cap on this, I appreciate you doing this because I think you and I both want to see the LCS broadcast succeed, and I think there are people out there who are just like, "Oh yeah, this sucks. Everybody sucks. This is cringe. It's unprofessional." Blah blah blah. But I think a lot of the discussion that you and I have been having, and that I have had to have, or I've tried to have in other areas, but elsewhere, is like, "Hey, I'd like to see. I know that this can be better, and I know that the people there can do better." And I don't know. I think it's good to push for some change there. So anyway, thank you so much, Sjokz, for the interview. We're gonna hang out now and catch up and gossip off camera. Bye.
Yes.